Deep in the backcountry of Algonquin Provincial Park, multiple unrelated campers have reported chilling encounters that defy every rule of the wilderness. Now taken together, their experiences suggest that something ancient and aware moves among the lakes and the portages, watching travelers from just beyond the firelight, revealing itself only when it chooses. What follows is a recap of some of the reports that I've received from this region over the years. A few seasons back, a couple had set out on a week-long paddle from Kiosk to Cedar Lake. On day one, heavy rain rolled in, and one of their paddles snapped just before a portage. The man carried the broken paddle about 50 feet into the bush and tucked it behind a fallen pine, planning to retrieve it on the way out a week later. But the storm worsened, trapping them for 3 days under relentless rain and wind. They saw no other canoes, and they heard no other voices. The entire park felt unnervingly still. Well, when the weather finally broke, they continued toward Cedar Lake. As they entered the bay, they saw a quiet campsite on a plateau and decided to check it out for future trips. Sitting there beside the fire pit was the same broken paddle they had stashed deep in the bush days earlier. They hadn't seen another soul. There was no traffic had passed through, and the idea of a stranger just hauling a useless paddle across lakes and trails only to leave it at an empty campsite made no sense at all. The couple just stood there frozen beside the fire ring, staring at a paddle that simply shouldn't have been there. And then in May of 1993, two cousins were relaxing beside an evening fire on a remote interior lake. Their fathers were fishing offshore as the sun fell behind a distant ridge. The boys had a clear view of the tall white pine on the crest above them, its silhouette sharp against the fiery sky. A man appeared on that ridge and walked along it. Too far to make out detail, they assumed he was a warden or a long-distance hiker. Well, they watched him approach the pine, place a hand on a low branch and duck beneath it before disappearing into the forest. When the adults finally returned, the boys mentioned the sighting and thought little more of it. Well, the next morning, curiosity led them up that hill. That low branch the figure had slipped under wasn't low at all. It hung some 9 feet off the ground. The realization hit them like a physical blow. Something had walked that ridge at sunset. Something tall enough to casually dip under a massive pine branch that no ordinary person could ever reach. And then, about a decade ago on Lake Louisa, a pair of experienced campers found themselves completely alone in the late October wilderness. Nights there are cold and silent, with no other travelers anywhere nearby. One night they heard heavy footsteps circling their camp, and not soft pads, not rustling leaves, but deliberate, heavy steps. Assuming it was a bear, they shouted to scare it off, but the pacing, the behavior, and the strange patience in its movement just felt wrong. It stayed just beyond the fire's edge, constantly shifting positions and watching. After 10 long minutes, it finally walked away, snapping sticks as it moved through the brush. The next morning, they searched for tracks, but could find nothing clear. Whatever had been stalking them had been careful. And years before that, 4 teenagers camped in a secluded area of the park. And on their first night around midnight, they all heard faint whispers and light giggling, as if children were playing among the trees. Exhaustion made them brush it off, but The next morning, several items around camp had been moved, and they assumed it was just raccoons. Well, on the second night, the whispers returned. Louder this time, closer, and unmistakably human. At dawn, the dew-covered ground revealed dozens of tiny footprints around the campsite. Small handprints pressed into the moisture of their tent walls and their picnic table. These prints were unmistakable. The teens packed up within minutes and left without looking back. Algonquin has a long reputation for unexplained events. Rangers and paddlers have whispered for decades about shadowy figures pacing around at night, enormous shapes moving silently along the ridgeline, and phantom paddles dipping into water where no canoe can be seen. And let's not forget the strange mimicry of human voices deep in the backcountry. First Nation legends from this region speak of tall forest watchers who move between lakes unseen. Some older stories even mention child-sized forest beings that appear before storms or moments of misfortune. These accounts echo eerily through many of the modern reports. All taken together, these encounters suggest that something sentient may roam those waterways and ridges of the Algonquin, unseen, unrecorded, and choosing to reveal itself only when the forest falls quiet enough for the travelers to hear its steps. Dear Biker, I live in eastern Tennessee, and this incident happened in July of 2022. I had just gotten home from a bit of late night shopping at Walmart around 1:30 a.m., and I was settling in for bed and had just stepped out of the bathroom after brushing my teeth. As I walked from the bathroom and started down the stairs to my bedroom, I heard an extremely loud buzzing or a humming sound coming from outside. It was so powerful that the windows in my house were rattling. Expecting to open the door and see a helicopter flying too low, or maybe even a jet passing overhead, I opened the front door to look outside. And what I saw instead was something that I could have never imagined. Facing south from my front door, I see a massive metallic black sphere hovering there in the air. I estimated to be around 150 feet in diameter. It was floating about 150 yards from where I stood at an altitude of somewhere between 200 and 250 feet. At the center of this sphere was a blue-white beam of light that resembled a laser. It spread outward from the craft, rotating slowly back and forth, up and down, like it was searching for something. As I stood motionless in the doorway, the beam swept directly over me. I felt no heat or pain, just a quick flash of light that blinded me for a split second. But this happened well after I had already seen the craft clearly for 20 to 30 seconds. The sound coming from this thing was overwhelming. It was a deep humming, almost a grinding noise, like a running lawnmower over a tree root, or the continuous pressure of a grinder without the chipping sound. It kind of reminded me of a pile driver, but steadier and without the impact strike. Whatever it was, the noise was loud enough to rattle the storm windows on my 2-story home. I still can't believe it didn't wake the entire neighborhood. After watching it hover for 20 to 30 seconds, silent except for that dreadful sound, I ran back inside to grab my iPhone, hoping it was close and low enough that the camera would catch something. I was inside for no more than 15 seconds. When I stepped back outside, the sphere was no longer in its original spot, but the noise hadn't faded. I could still hear it clearly, so I began searching the area. I ran around to the back of the house as fast as I could, still wearing my house shoes. To my shock, the craft had moved at least 2 miles away in those brief seconds, and all I could see was the faint remnant of that rotating beam, still moving in that same searching pattern, before the sphere disappeared behind the ridgeline. I didn't even try to film it. It was far too distant to capture anything useful. As I watched that last trace of the beam vanish behind the ridge, another loud noise suddenly filled the sky. This time it was familiar. I turned back toward the house and I saw 3 black helicopters flying in a tight formation. They were flying low, moving fast, and only had their forward spotlights turned on. They were headed in the exact same direction that the craft had taken. Now, I've seen many strange lights in the sky, and I've had an earlier UFO encounter that changed the way I view physics, reality, religion, and the boundaries of what's possible. But this was nothing like those experiences. Every other sighting had filled me with excitement, wonder, and sometimes even comfort. This object, it filled me with fear and dread. I still wish I'd never seen it. I struggled to sleep afterward, and every time the image of that massive black sphere rose in my mind, the sound always came with it. It sent chills through me every single time. I'm reaching out to the UFO community in the hopes that someone has seen the same object in person or in a video. I want to understand what this thing might have been and why it made me feel the way it did. Thank you for your time and keep watching the skies. Signed, Ron. Dear Tattooed, I have a story that might not fit in the traditional, unexplained category, but it's definitely eerie. You see, I grew up in eastern Kentucky, on a hill that everyone in the area considered haunted. Next to my neighborhood, there was a dirt road with gas wells, and that's where we rode our bikes and our four-wheelers. Hardly anyone ever walked back there. One day, though, I had run out of gas on my dirt bike, so I decided to walk along the road. I was about 15 at the time, in my first year of high school. I had my machete with me, keeping an eye out for snakes and deer, and when suddenly I see 2 men standing right in front of me. Now, this stretch of road is straight for about 200 to 300 yards, and out of nowhere, these guys just appeared some 20 feet away. And I told them, "You scared the life out of me." And that's when one of the men replied, "Well, I'm sorry." They walked closer and started asking me questions like, "How did you get out of here?" I said I live just a half mile from here. And they asked, "How did you get past the gates?" I told them there is no gate, but there used to be one. But it was removed a few years ago. And it was true. That was the only entrance for miles. The road goes on forever, and the other entrance, miles away, didn't have a gate either. Their question was strange, especially because they were coming from the direction of my house. If they had walked that way, they should have known the gate hadn't existed for years. As they were talking to me, I started feeling more and more uneasy. They were staring straight into my eyes the entire time, not looking around, not looking at my machete, not even glancing in the direction I pointed when I explained things. Only one of the men was talking, but both of them just kept staring into my eyes without breaking focus. It really hit me how odd the whole thing was. I rarely saw anyone out there unless they were riding a motorbike. I decided to head back towards my house, and as we passed each other, I felt really nervous, so after a few steps I turned around, and they were just gone. Not walking away, not turning down a side trail, simply gone. And there was nowhere to hide. The trees weren't thick enough. There were no dips in the ground, nothing. My heart started racing and I sped up, looking back again, still seeing nothing. And that's when a feeling of panic and dread really hit, and I took off running. When I reached the road again, there was no work truck, no vehicle, nothing at all around. I sprinted to my house, slammed the door, and locked it behind me. I yelled out to my mom that someone was trying to kill me. These two men, they were really strange. They were trying to kill me, I think. I don't know why I said that. It was just the feeling I had at the time. Well, I stayed freaked out the rest of the day. Anyway, I just wanted to share. Signed, Chris. Dear Biker, my wife has roots in Arctic Village, a remote settlement of about 150 residents in the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge in Alaska. Most of them live a really simple lifestyle. The nearest hub city is Fairbanks, about a 2-hour flight south. The Gwich'in Athabascan people have lived there for thousands of years and are well adapted to the land and the wildlife. Arctic Village sits on a plateau in a valley, surrounded by lakes, marshes, and rolling mountains. It's a stunning area, especially during the summer, with the lush tundra and trees. This story comes from one of my wife's cousins, who has 2 boys that live there. In the fall of 2017, her children were playing outside as usual. She called them in, and the 3-year-old started walking toward the house, followed shortly by her teenager. When the teen arrived, they realized that the little boy never reached the house. They began calling for him and retracing his path. After 10 minutes, more people joined the search. About an hour later, scanning across a lake and a marsh, she finally spotted him about a mile away in rough and wet terrain. Her teen son brought him home safely on the 4-wheeler. Strange details started to emerge. The 3-year-old was perfectly clean, despite traveling through marshy terrain, and his shoes were missing. When asked what had happened, the boy said only that the big man had taken it. Why he was spared and how he moved so quickly without getting dirty remains unexplained. The native people there believe in the Nayan, or the woodsman, an entity said to inhabit the wilderness and sometimes steals children. Thank you for taking the time to read this, and feel free to ask questions. This subject is fascinating and also a bit terrifying, especially for parents like me. Signed, Gregory. Hey Biker, I'm not a regular around here and I don't know much about the unexplained, but I recently heard an email on your channel that reminded me of a story involving my 10-year-old sister. My mom told me about it a few months ago. And what really caught my attention in that other email were the description of dark and shadowy figures. This happened late sometime in 2017 near Winter Park, Colorado, at a family friend's cabin. Now this cabin is in a fairly remote area with only a few houses around. I've been there twice myself, but I wasn't along during this particular trip. I live in California now. Anyway, my family had spent the day sledding and had gotten back to the cabin in the early evening. My parents and their friends were downstairs playing board games, while my 3 siblings and their 2 friends were upstairs just hanging out. Well, at some point, my mom noticed that my younger sister wasn't with the rest of the kids and asked my other sister where she had gone. My sister said that she had went into her room to listen to music, so my mom didn't think anything of it. Well, an hour goes by, and my mom still hasn't seen or heard her, which was unusual because my sister never gave up a chance to play with her friends. When she asked again, my other sister gave the same answer. She's still in her room. So when my mom goes to check, she's shocked to find the room empty. Immediately she panics and starts calling for her. No answer. Everyone in the house starts searching every room, every corner, but no luck. My mom confronts my other sister again, accusing her of lying, but she insists that she was telling the truth and thought that she was really in there listening to her music. By this point, it's been nearly 2 hours since anyone's seen her. My mom goes outside, desperate to find her. And this is where she said that she saw the most horrifying thing of her life. My sister was inside our car, her face pressed against the window glass, wide-eyed and screaming. My mom said it looked like something out of a horror movie. Everyone just assumed that she must have accidentally locked herself inside. Now, I'm not sure how a very intelligent 10-year-old manages to lock herself in a car, but I digress. When they finally opened the door, my mom realized that she wasn't acting normal. She almost seemed to be in kind of a trance. Well, they took her inside and tried to ask her what had happened, but she wouldn't respond to anything. She stayed in that trance-like state for over an hour before my mom finally gave up and put her to bed. The next morning, she seemed mostly back to herself, but still shaken from the experience. When my mom asked how she had ended up in the car, she said she didn't remember getting in there at all. She said that the only thing she remembered was that while she was locked in the car, a man dressed entirely in black approached. She said that she was terrified and tried to get out. But the man came closer and told her that he would let her out, but only if she did something for him. He held out a black rose up to the window and told her that he wanted her to come outside so he could give it to her. After that, she doesn't remember anything. When my mom heard this, she went outside to look around the car, and to her amazement, she could see a trail of footsteps leading from the car out past the house and into the forest. According to my mom, no one had been walking or playing in that area earlier, so she was deeply disturbed. We still don't know what to think. My mom said the expression on my sister's face inside that car was genuinely terrifying. And I'm not sure what happened that night, but the connection between a shadowy figure, a trance-like state, and missing time made me think of the stories that I've heard on your channel. And if I'm not mistaken, Colorado is known for being a hotspot for missing persons cases. I'm just thankful that my sister didn't become one of them. But maybe she saw something similar to what others have seen before their disappearance. Thanks for reading. Signed, Thomas.
He's got scars on his arms, flames on his chest, rides a steel horse, won't ever rest. Chasing whispers through the foggy pines, searching for truths that slip through time. Moonlight bends where he rolls, the shadows speak. They've got souls, inking shadows, leather and lore. He's knocking on the other world's door. Bigfoot's howl, dog man's glare, man in black just vanishing there. Inking shadows, truth to find.